achieved.
So I'm coming off an event, to say the least, was not well done. I think I went 3-8 overall at the UFC China event, and my predictions weren't on. Fighters overperformed, others underperformed. But at the same time, I have this bad taste in my mouth when I see, and I don't hold an ill will against these people, but when I see local fighters winning a whole pile of fights that normally they wouldn't win. I have nothing against Weili Zhang. She capitalized on a situation and she put down Jessica Andrade for the title. I did feel like, is there something going on here? Like the fight shut down pretty quick. But it's just like, would she have won that fight if she fought in North America or if she fought in Brazil? And the fact that the champion was Brazilian, did she not warrant the right to get to host that fight? I don't know. It just there's something just inherently not sitting well with me with regard to these fights, and it's always hard to gauge the impact of two fighters fighting with potentially the underdog fighting at home. They have shown me nothing that would indicate they're going to win this fight, and yet because they're at home, their situation improves as a result. Their opponent's situation actually is more difficult, and it plays out in the cage as such. Same thing with the co-main event, Dos Santos versus Jing Liang. I felt like Dos Santos was the better fighter, and in most situations he wins that matchup. I felt like the stoppage was a little bit quick at the end, but maybe even if that knockdown might have been enough to give him the decision victory. Either way, just left a bad taste in my mouth, and it almost makes me want to not predict fights, events transpiring in other locations outside of North America or Brazil. I don't know. There's just something about it. Either way, shit card, worst showing in recent memory. Let's see if we can get back on track here. Welcome back to Kamikaze Overdrive MMA Predictions. Always, I am your host, Scott Johnson, and on this episode of the show, we are breaking down the upcoming UFC 242 event, which will transpire, oddly enough, in Abu Dhabi, United Arab Emirates, the UAE, on September 7th. I'll be giving you my 5 main card predictions for this episode of the show. All of my preliminary picks will be available at kamikazeoverdrive.net. People routinely post when they read my prediction, when they hear this video, your prelim picks aren't up yet. I'm doing my best to get them up throughout the week. I take my time breaking down the main card fights, and then I break down the prelim fights. I think you'd much rather have me spend a little bit of time going through the fights and analyzing and predicting with patience than if I just rush and throw a fight out there. All right, throw a prediction out there and throw something against the wall and hope it sticks. So I'm doing my best. The bet packs will also be available for sale. I'm hoping to rebound this weekend. We're starting a new subscription pack, so the subscription you'll have to purchase. And again, you usually save between $20 and $30 if you subscribe for the next 2 months. I can't remember the exact total. I have to look it up to see how many events transpire over September and October. Follow me on Twitter at KO_predictions. And on that note, we've got lots of fights to get to, so let's get to that first main card prediction. Fight number 1 of the main card transpires in the UFC's lightweight division as 27-5-0 Austrian Mairbek Taisumov takes on Brazil's 15-2-0 Diego Ferreira. Taisumov has won 6 in a row, 10 of his last 11. Very impressive. He's got wins over guys like Bobby Green. Is it Bobby Green or Des Green? I think it was Des Green, Damir Hadzovic, Alan Patrick. He's looking for a ranked opponent, and again, he's not getting it here, but this probably is the last step before he gets a ranked opponent if he can get a victory. For Ferreira, he has won 4 in a row. He's 6-2 in the UFC. He's coming off an upset win over Rustam Khabib. I had Ferreira in that matchup. He also beat Jared Gordon. He beat Olivier Aubin-Mercier, so some solid opponents there. Again, he's looking for a top 15 opponent. He probably gets an opportunity with a win here. Physically, both guys are 5'9", 1 inch reach advantage for the Brazilian. Taisumov is the younger fighter for 3 years, and he's been on the shelf for almost a year as well. And Taisumov's promoted as one of these guys that fighters aren't really lining up to fight him, and then with his visa issues, it's been difficult to get him these fights, and he's been spending a lot of time competing at the lower levels. We'll have to see how this plays out here. Now, both guys offer a good mix of striking and groundwork. Now, we've seen them recently transition away from certain aspects of their offense. For example, Taisumov showcases wrestling very early in his UFC, but he's very much moved to more of a striking-centric attack. For Ferreira, he doesn't put up a big volume of takedowns, but he has shown if he takes you down, he's so talented on the mat, he can finish you on the ground, and that's what he could be looking for here. Now, on the flip side of things, Ferreira's had some issues giving up takedowns. He gave up 3 against Beneil Dariush, 3 in his win over Rustam Khabib. Something he needs to be very careful of against a very solid top player in Taisumov, who's already going to have some good offensive weapons vertical. Do not allow him to gain some top position and hold him down. Now, the only UFC loss for Taisumov came against Michel Prazeis, which was on the strength of 3 takedowns for the Brazilian and a lot of top control, and that's something that has to be a concern. That was several years ago, but you look through the lineup, and Taisumov hasn't really faced a lot of top-level ground fighters like Prazeis. Prazeres, I kept saying it incorrectly, my apologies. My voice is not exactly helping me out right now. On the feet, Fajeda's got power, absolutely, and if he's forced to stand and strike, he can win fights on the feet. But he tends to be a little bit wild at times, which, drains his cardio and leaves him open to counter shots. And he has been knocked out. Dustin Poirier, who's fighting for the title as the interim champion, knocked him out. Even Kyle Nelson, not too long ago, hurt him in the early exchanges and had Fajeda in some trouble prior to the fight going to the ground. It led to the takedown and led to the finish for Diego. Now, for Taisumov, he's got a lot of power in his strikes. He's a far more technical striker. He's very good when he fights at range. He's got a lot of power on the outside. Hard low kicks could certainly be a weapon against Fajeda, especially if he can limit his movement, and then those power punches to really blast him once he closes the distance a little bit. Fajeda seems really overly committed to his striking, and it almost seems like, despite his acumen on the ground, he wants to stand and bang with you until he's forced to go to the mat. And against a guy like Taisumov, if you're waiting too long, you might not get that opportunity to go to the ground because he might get you out of there before it happens, or at least do enough damage that you're unable to do effectively. Fajeda, I don't think he can win this fight unless he gets the knockout or obviously a freak submission. If Fajeda works his jiu-jitsu, legit chance of scoring a finish. I don't think he will here. I think he's going to get drawn into that striking matchup early, and he's going to find himself in a slugfest with a fighter who's a far superior striker. And while Fajeda's got power, Taisumov is just better at delivering it. I think Taisomov's just too much for him on the feet, and my prediction is Mairbek Taisumov to defeat Diego Fajeda by knockout. Fight number 2 in the pay-per-view goes down in the UFC's heavyweight division as the 4th-ranked Curtis Razor Blaydes, 11-2-0 with 1 no contest, takes on the 9th-ranked Shamil Abdurakhimov with a current record of 20 wins and 4 defeats. Now, Blaydes is coming off a win over Justin Willis. He could be 7-1 over his last 8 fights in the heavyweight division, but he had that no contest against Adam Milstead. I think it was marijuana is what he popped for. His only loss in that stretch was against Francis Ngannou. He beat Alistair Overeem, he beat Mark Hunt, he beat Alexei Oleinik, he's beat a solid number of guys. That's about as good a resume as I can imagine without getting a title shot. And obviously the Ngannou loss slowed that down. I would imagine Blaydes at some point will get an opportunity to fight for the title. I don't know if a win here is enough to get him there, but it certainly moves him in the right direction. For Abdurakhimov, he has won 3 in a row. Marcin Tybura, Andrea Arlovski, and Chase Sherman. 5 of 6 wins. 5 of his last 6 fights have ended in victory. 8 of his last 10. So again, a very good resume as well. Blaydes, though, 1 inch taller. He's got a 4-inch reach advantage. And the big thing is, Curtis Blaydes could come into this fight 25 to 30 pounds heavier than Shamil, and he is the younger man by 10 years. So physically, all the stats favoring the American here. And now when you look at this fight, it really comes down to 2 scenarios. For Abdurakhimov, he wants to stay vertical and either knock out or outwork Blaydes on the feet. For Blaydes, he wants a takedown, he wants top position, and either a grinding, controlling decision or a ground and pound finish. That's what it comes down to. So when you look at Blaydes first, he completed 7 takedowns against Justin Willis, who's a fairly stout fighter. He had 4 against Overeem, 10 versus Mark Hunt. He's only had 2 fights in his UFC career where he didn't get any takedowns. A quick knockout loss to Francis Ngannou, and then against Daniel Omilanchuk, he scored a striking-based victory. It was kind of one of those fights where it was like, despite the fact that Omilanchuk's had some issues with takedown defense, Blaydes won the fight on the feet. Once he gets to the ground, he's got good top control, very good at riding with his opponents and rolling with them, hard to get out from underneath, and the fear of getting taken down often will slow an opponent down and make them hesitate when they want to close that distance. Solid ground and pound from top position, he can finish, or as I previously mentioned, he can just hold you down and grind you out for a decision. Now, for Abdurakhimov, he has showcased some improved striking in recent fights. He put down both Chase Sherman and Marcin Tybura, knocking them both out, and he outworked guys like Walt Harris and Andrea Arlovski, going the distance and getting the nod in both those matchups. But his volume overall isn't that huge. In fact, he actually relies on his opponents to not be overly aggressive. He relies on his opponents to almost wait on him a little bit. He usually averages in the 35 to 45 range as far as striking is concerned. Where Blaydes, when he doesn't use takedowns, again, those kind of skew the numbers as far as striking volume. Again, in that Omilanchuk fight, 72 significant strikes landed. So you wonder, even if Shamil keeps this fight standing, can he land enough? Is he going to be concerned pressing forward and fear the takedown and not engage as much on the feet, which will allow Blaydes to outwork him on the feet? So we're not even sure if the striking on the feet is the best option for him. Now, his takedown defense has been 66%. Arlovski landed a pair of takedowns. Derek Lewis landed 1 takedown in that fight. And you go all the way back to his debut, Timothy Johnson landed 1 takedown, and just like Lewis, top position ground and pounding for the finish. Now, you have to, and when you look at it through, Blaydes is easily the best wrestler that Abdurakhimov has ever faced in the UFC, so you have to figure that into the equation. And when he faced Derek Lewis, the fight, he was winning the matchup for the majority of it, just picking away at him, circling, a very inactive, very unentertaining fight for the most part. And a lot of it came down to the fact that Lewis wasn't engaging, and Shamil was very afraid of the takedown, and he recognized the consequences that eventually came his way anyway. And as a result, he wasn't very active. And you wonder if that's going to be a similar approach here, or if he's just going to go all in, if he's got some renewed confidence, especially with the power in his hands, that he can put you down. Now, we have seen Blaydes knocked out. Francis Ngannou took him out. Very impressive. Francis Ngannou hits a horse. That horse is going down. Hits a train. That train's going down. So that gives you an idea what it takes to put this guy out of here, especially when you go back to the first Ngannou fight. Blaydes went down because of doctor stoppage, so he took a lot of damage. Now, Mark Hunt, I believe, did hurt Blaydes in that matchup. I had Hunt in that fight, wrongfully, unfortunately. We did see Blaydes hurt in that fight, but got the takedown and got what he needed to do. It takes a lot to get him out of here. Can Shamil put him down? I don't know. Blaydes overall is the younger fighter. He's the better athlete. He's faster. He's between 20 and 30 pounds heavier, which is huge for a wrestler. We've heard talk before where if you're a striker, the lighter person, the quicker person has the advantage. But once you transition to the wrestling game, you want to be heavier. You want to be the bigger man. You want to lean on your opponents. You want to be able to push them over. You want to force them in positions they're not comfortable with. That's massive. Shamil will need to make the most of his vertical opportunities in this fight, and he's not going to have many. Look for that short of a flash knockout where Blaydes gets floored with a shot, gets taken out, or possibly gets clipped and is just gun shy the rest of the fight, which I don't know if that'll be the case because, again, he tends to go to his wrestling quicker if he gets hurt. I think Blaydes is simply too much for him in the wrestling department. I don't like the odds necessarily on this fight. I feel like Blaydes is too big of a favorite because Shamil does have that one-punch power. But in the same scenario, I feel like he is going to struggle to find his edge to win this matchup. I think Blaydes takes him down, pounds him out, and my prediction is Curtis Blaydes to defeat Shamil Abdurakhimov by TKO. Our next fight presents a very interesting stylistic matchup as the 15th ranked Islam Makhachev, 17-1-0, takes on the Tasmanian Devil, 10-2-0 Davi Ramos. They're fighting under the lightweight division. Now, Makhachev comes into this matchup. Makhachev comes in having won 5 in a row. He's 6-1 in the UFC. I got the only fight predicted Adriano Martins to knock him out back in the day, which is his only loss. He has wins over Tarzukin, Cajun Johnson, Gleison Tebow, Nick Lenz, a pretty solid list of guys he's put down. For Davi Ramos, he's won 4 in a row with Chris Grutzmacher, Nick Hine, and John Gunther all going down to him. Physically, Mock's 4 inches taller, of the same reach, and he is the younger man by 5 inches. Now, you're looking at Davi Ramos first. He's a third-degree BJJ black belt. Conversely, Makhachev is an international master in Sambo. So we have that Sambo versus Jiu-Jitsu matchup, which should be very, very interesting. Both fighters have 7 career victories by submission. For Ramos, 4 by rear naked choke, which stands out. For Islam, 3 by armbar, 2 by RNC. So both guys are capable of finishing. Takedowns have been a massive part of their respective success in the UFC. For Ramos, 10 takedowns over his 4 UFC victories. Only needed 1 completion and 2 first-round finishes. So you could consider those numbers could be bigger if he didn't get the finish early in the fight. For Makhachev, he's landed 17 takedowns over 6 UFC victories. He knocked out Gleison Tebow in relatively quick fashion, so he didn't land a takedown in that fight. And he had a very quick win against Cajun Johnson, which only required 1 takedown, so his numbers would even be larger as well. Now, looking at Davi Ramos first, he's got a very nice entry on his double leg. He's had times he hasn't been able to finish, but he's very good at transitioning to a back-to-back control. So if you shut down that initial blast, he will rotate around, get his hands on your hips, rotate around, get to your back, which is a scary proposition. He'll also close behind his strikes, which I like. And again, establishing that body lock sets up that ability to rotate to your back. And again, his success in that position and his desire to be in that position is evidenced by his big rear naked choke numbers. If he's forced to strike, he's a heavily muscled guy, so he's got big power. He throws a lot of single strikes. He's got a big right hand. But at the same time, in his most recent fight, he was eating some shots, and the striking exchanges weren't necessarily going the best and forcing him to go to his grappling game. For Ramos, he's also a heavily muscled individual, as I just mentioned, which could create some issues if he's forced out of his comfort zone and expected to strike for the duration of an entire fight. And if he can't find success with his grappling, that's going to be an issue. For Makhachev, he demonstrated excellent balance in his last fight against Tarzukin, who was looking to take him down with regularity. His opponent would get in deep on a shot, even him extremely off balance, and he was just very good at getting a limb down and getting back to a solid base and then getting out of there. He's hard to control even when you do get a chance to put him on the ground. He's good in scrambles, and I think that's going to cause a problem with Ramos simply wearing him out. Offensively, I don't expect to see Makhachev going for a lot of takedowns here. He's going to use his grappling, I would think, for the most part, at least early, in a defensive manner, make Ramos swing and miss on the feet, make him fight in a position he's not comfortable with, and shoot unsuccessfully, start to pull guard. And overall, I just think Makhachev is the more capable striker. He's got power, and he's got just better volume numbers as well. Now, when you look at Makhachev, he could score a knockout, or he could outwork him on the feet and just win the fight on the basis of just being the better striker. He's also incapable, I think, of enduring those early takedown attempts from Ramos, and once Davi starts to tire, look for Islam Makhachev to get on top and hold top position and grind him out and really cement the later part of the fight with his top position against a guy who's willing to pull guard and try and operate from a grappling position, even though it's not a winning position. And again, I don't want to, Davi Ramos is the type of guy, I think he's the type who will start to pull guard, start to fall to his butt, and just butt flop, if you will, and start trying to get out of some spots he's not happy with without actually going offensive. So if he's not happy with the striking exchanges and he's starting to get tired, look for that scenario to start popping up. Mach needs to be very careful giving up the positional advantage in the first round, especially if he gets taken down, and especially if he tries to turn and give up his back to get back to his feet, because Ramos is so opportunistic and he's so deadly from back control. But again, I just don't think he has enough here short of a fluke situation. I think Makhachev just puts a lot on him, and my prediction is Islam Makhachev to defeat Davi Ramos by decision. In the co-main event of the evening, we're in the UFC's lightweight division for a rematch as the 7th-ranked junior Edson Barboza, 20 wins, 7 losses, and no draws, takes on the 10th-ranked Irish Dragon Paul Felder with a current record of 16 wins and 4 defeats. Now, this is a rematch from 2015. I don't know if it's a rematch we were really looking forward to, but it's kind of a nice fight nonetheless. Barboza winning that matchup by decision. I correctly predicted that fight all the way back in 2015. Edson is coming off a brutal knockout loss to Justin Gaethje. He has just 1 win in his last 4 fights, but then when you look at who he's fought, in addition to Gaethje, Khabib Nurmagomedov, the champ, Kevin Lee, one of the top fighters in the division, or formerly in the division, and his TKO victory over Hooker was also very impressive in that span. For Felder, he has won 4 of his last 5. His only loss in that span came at welterweight on short notice against Mike Perry. He's beat James Vick, Charles Oliveira, and Stevie Ray, and that's a solid list of guys to have defeated. Physically, both guys 5'11". Barboza will have a sizable 5-inch reach advantage, and he's the younger man. You wouldn't normally expect that, but he's the younger man compared to Paul Felder by 2 years. Now, looking back at the first fight, Barboza was coming off a loss to Michael Johnson. Felder, it was his 3rd fight in the UFC. He was 10-0 undefeated. 2-0 in the UFC at that point in time. Overall, Barboza landed more strikes, 64-47. The first round, he edged it out by a handful. In the second round, Felder, I think, landed 1 more significant strike, and then the final round, the edge was significant for the Brazilian. I would say he landed almost, not quite 3-1, but definitely better than 2-1 over Barboza in the 3rd frame, really pulling away in that matchup. As far as the analysis of what went on in the cage, it was just more simplistic but effective offense from the Brazilian. He was landing a lot of 1-2s, backing Felder up. And working in the kicks as well. But Felder was throwing flashy offense, and it wasn't coming as often, and it was not as impactful. It was hit or miss whether it was actually connecting, and it just wasn't having that. He just wasn't as busy as Barboza. Now, Felder did some solid damage to Barboza's eye. It bothered him, but it wasn't enough. He really didn't capitalize on it, I don't feel, to the fullest extent. We also saw Barboza as the faster fighter in that matchup, which allowed him to land more frequently and beat Felder to the punch. And that helped edge out in a very close fight. It was one of those matchups where going into it, it was hard to find a solid edge. I took the perspective of, Felder doesn't offer that ground-based attack that a lot of guys use against Barboza. Barboza's a very difficult man to beat in a striking contest if you can't flat-out knock him out, and that's what the edge I went with. So we'll see if that holds up here as well. In the aftermath of that matchup, Felder lost to Ross Pearson, a bit of an upset, but has won 6 of his last 8. Barboza lost to Tony Ferguson next time out, but then went on to beat Anthony Pettis, Gilbert Melendez, and Benito Dariush before this current 1-3 skid. So both guys have had success and failures in the aftermath of the original fight. Now, Felder in more recent fights, especially the James Vick fight, has focused on throwing more functional offense. He still throws those spinning back kicks and back fists, but he's being more aggressive. He's being more nasty with his functional offense. It's higher percentage moves that are going to land and do damage. He's still mixing those spinning attacks, but he's just being more effective. But the thing that I still look at that is concerning, he still doesn't offer those overwhelming volume numbers. For a guy like Paul Felder, who's not necessarily knocking you out, a lot of his knockouts come from top position on the ground when he beats a guy up and can put him down with elbows or really gets him against the cage. I want to see Paul Felder in the low 70s all the way up to 90 range. I want to see him kicking out 25 to 35 strikes a round, and he's not there. And that's something that absolutely is a massive concern. he doesn't bring the volume or the pressure of the type of guys that have beaten Edson Barboza in the past. The key to beating Edson has been a mix or just a very heavy lean on either wrestling-based pressure or striking-based pressure, or the two of them combined. Guys like Tony Ferguson, Michael Johnson, Khabib Nurmagomedov, Kevin Lee, these guys, Justin Gaethje, have stormed forward and looked for takedowns or look for big strike combinations and just pressure. Don't let him set up his offense. That's not what Felder's shown us. Felder doesn't have that big takedown attack. Even though he can operate from top position if given the opportunity, he doesn't have that big takedown attack, and he doesn't have the volume to consistently trade with Edson and get the better of it. Now, on the flip side of things, Barboza has been knocked out twice. Actually, 2 of his last 3 fights have ended by knockout. But again, I don't see Felder having that one-punch opportunity. He's kind of, I don't want to call him a death by accumulation fighter because he doesn't offer the volume for that. But at the same time, he's one of those guys who really needs to hurt you a couple of times before he can get you out of there. Now, Barboza mentally needs to rebound from that knockout defeat. He needs to have confidence in this matchup. He needs to recognize he's already beat this fighter once. He needs to be in a good state mentally, which is hard to gauge. On the flip side, Felder's been out for a while. He had those lung issues, and some people had said he needs to walk away. That's a big problem physically, and that should be something that keeps him out of action, and he's back in there. I expect this could be another close fight if Barboza doesn't get him out of there. Look for Barboza again to simply land more offense, working in those kicks, quicker combinations to edge him out in volume, probably somewhere in that 70 to 45, 50 range. I would not be shocked to see Barboza land something to the midsection that's too much for Felder and just hurts him to the body. But my prediction is Edson Barboza to defeat Paul Felder by decision. We move now to the main event of the evening as the UFC lightweight title and the UFC interim lightweight title will be unified as the undefeated champion, the Eagle, Khabib Nurmagomedov, 27-0, takes on the Diamond, Dustin Poirier, with a record of 24 wins, 5 losses, and 1 no contest. Now, Nurmagomedov is coming off the Conor McGregor victory. Huge victory. Also a bit of a debacle with the aftermath and how everything played out there. Still undefeated, which is massive. He's been champ since early 2018, but just the one title defense against McGregor. He's got recent victory, Ali Quinta, Conor, Edson Barboza, Michael Johnson, and Rafael dos Anjos, a very sound resume. For Dustin Poirier, he's coming off a solid, entertaining victory over the featherweight champion Max Holloway to claim the interim title. He also has wins for Eddie Alvarez, Justin Gaethje, Anthony Pettis, and Jim Miller, so also a very solid resume of lightweight opponents. Now, for Nurmagomedov, he is 1 inch taller. Poirier will have a 2 inch reach advantage and is a year younger. Nurmagomedov comes into this matchup. He's been out of action for 11 months. And it's worth noting, Poirier came up from featherweight, but he's actually talking to the media about how he's struggling to make 155 now because he's filled out so much and he's so physically strong, and that could be a massive factor here. Now, you look at Dustin Poirier, he wants to fight this matchup at range. Not shocking, most people do against Nurmagomedov. He wants to work on the outside and use those long-range punches and his long-range weapons. He's got a very nice long right jab. Again, working from that range position. His kicks are a lesser weapon, but he works them in, but it just seems like they're not as impactful as other fighters. But that's probably a good thing against a guy who wants to try and get a hold of you and put you on the ground. Once Poirier moves in and closes the distance, he snaps off those 3-4 punch combinations where he does a nice job of trying to punch around his opponent's guard, come up with an uppercut, work into the body. He's very effective in that position. He's got a powerful right hook on the outside that he can do a lot of damage with. And again, one thing I really love is the way he sticks multiple punches together. He'll throw a long punch and then a secondary short punch from the same side. It's just like pop, pop, pop. And he just keeps touching up his opponents and puts a lot of volume on them and hurts them and backs them up and exhausts them. He'll use a lot of movement, a lot of fakes and feints, which will draw out his opponent's actions, which can certainly create a situation where Khabib is diving on attempts that aren't there because Poirier is not where he expects him to be. Now, Dustin has been knocked out twice. Conor McGregor at featherweight and Michael Johnson destroyed him, which is crazy to think Michael Johnson has wins over Tony Ferguson and Dustin Poirier. Nothing against MJ, just a very good fighter, just not the greatest of consistency. But Poirier's been knocked out twice, so his chin is far from perfect. He's also been hurt. I think Joe Duffy hurt him in a fight earlier in his career as well. Poirier's takedown defense really hasn't been tested much in recent action. He ended up on his back a couple times against Eddie Alvarez and was... he looked for a guillotine a couple times in that matchup, and it didn't work out for him. He needs to be very mindful of doing for silly things like that here. Now, he did give up his back in that fight, got caught in a neck crank, was able to survive. He got mounted as well, which is certainly cause for concern. In that fight, the victory actually came because the referee stood them up after he landed some illegals, 12-6 elbows, Alvarez did, and it led to the finishing sequence on the feet, so certainly an advantage there. Now, when you look at Poirier when he fought Max Holloway, he was landing big shots, stunned him multiple times, very impressive in that fight, and that is huge. Now, looking at the champion, Khabib Nurmagomedov has been a destroyer of worlds, absolutely. But you got to look and see where he's vulnerable. When you go back to this fight with Michael Johnson, he looked a little lost with the volume and activity of Michael Johnson in that fight. Now, Nurmagomedov was coming off like a 2-year layoff. Here it's not quite 1 year, but still, that certainly can play a role. Now, in the Johnson fight, every time Nurmagomedov stepped in, Johnson threw offense. Every time Nurmagomedov stepped back, Johnson moved forward, he threw offense. He landed a lot of strikes against Nurmagomedov. Nurmagomedov eventually shot in, got the takedown, put him down, the fight was over. That was massive. When you look at how Barboza played against Nurmagomedov, it wasn't nearly as effective. Edson was moving back way too much. He was trying to counter-strike, trying to hurt him as he came forward. Nurmagomedov just moved in, got that body lock, got that takedown, and destroyed him. For Iaquinta, he had some success early in that matchup, but he wasn't active enough, and he was eventually taken down. He got mauled on the mat, but he survived. Khabib absolutely has power on the feet when they were exchanging in that fight, and we saw it against Conor McGregor, but he swings a little bit wild. He's got good power, as I said. Lots of single strikes, though. But the concern of getting taken down from his opponents certainly opens up opportunities for Nurmagomedov to engage because they're mindful of other things. And then we saw that massive right hand that dropped Conor McGregor, showing that he is dangerous. So there is a legit concern on the feet as well. One thing I've always thought, which I don't like, Khabib puts his head up when he's under attack. He lifts his chin, he backs up straight up at times, and it exposes him. I like the way he closes the distance looking for the body lock, or he'll dive on a low single and just look to engage. Almost like Cain Velasquez Jr. dos Santos style, where he's like, I just want to get my hands on you, get you down to the mat, and I'll figure it out from there. He's so good at creating something out of nothing and turning you from a position where you're like, oh, I'm pretty good at defending. Like we saw Conor have some success defending takedowns and almost gain a slight positional advantage, and then boom. Khabib just keeps moving, and eventually he's in top position. He's good at scrambling to that better position. He's very good at wrapping up his opponent's legs and extending them to keep their ability to get their base from underneath of them, and it doesn't allow them to get back to the feet. Very impressive there. Now, when you look at Conor, his best round in that matchup was round 3, and Nurmagomedov didn't look as effective. He seemed uncertain at times, and McGregor was landing strikes, but he was so tired he couldn't really capitalize on it. Eventually the fight hit the ground. And Khabib is a monster from top position, and he has that, we haven't seen the style that has been able to prevent or prolong his cardio issues. That's certainly a concern. But when you look at Dustin Poirier, he could present just that. He has the activity and pressure of a Michael Johnson. Maybe not quite the speed, but still he's pretty quick. He's got that punching power, that sharp shooting, striking power of a Conor McGregor. Maybe not quite as effective, but still it's there. And he has the cardio and defensive grappling of Iaquinta, where he can get out of spots, survive in spots, and his cardio is good. It's going to keep being there in the later stages. We've seen him break guys like Justin Gaethje, who normally takes a lot of damage, and it's hard to get him out of there. We saw him break when usually it's the other way around. Gaethje's taking the damage and his opponent's faltering. That's massive. Look for Poirier in this matchup to keep Khabib on his back foot. Volume and forward pressure and variety are going to be the keys here. He's going to hurt him. He's going to keep him unsettled and force some of those long, elongated attempts to get the fight to the ground. Diving shots, failed body lock attempts, spinning out of there. And the thing is, even if he gets taken down, Poirier is capable of surviving, especially in round 1. If he can survive round 1 and force Khabib to work hard, his cardio is solid enough to capitalize on round 2 and round 3 if he doesn't get absolutely destroyed, which again is a possibility. Look for Khabib. The first 2 rounds will be very interesting, but look for rounds 3 and rounds 4 and rounds 5 where Poirier starts to turn it up. I think Dustin has all the elements of guys that have had minor amounts of success against Nurmagomedov. He has enough of those elements brought together where he can capitalize here. Poirier is going to do it with volume. I know it's not going to be a popular pick here. He's going to sting him on multiple occasions. He's going to force Khabib out of his element. And my prediction is Dustin Poirier to defeat Khabib Nurmagomedov by TKO. So those are my 5 main card predictions for UFC 242. All of my preliminary picks will be available at kamikazeoverdrive.net, so please check them out. The bet packs also will be available for sale. If you sign up for the subscription pack, you'll save $20-$30. You can follow me on Twitter at KO_predictions. I'm a little bit rushed, so I'm speaking very quickly. Either way, thank you very much for tuning in. I greatly appreciate it. Let's see how we pull this off. I know I'm going to get a lot of hate for picking Poirier, but I think some of my reasons are valid, and that's what I like to promote. Even if you don't agree with me, I think in a lot of cases you can at least see some of the logic in my picks, and I think the Dustin Poirier pick is grounded in some solid logic. If Nurmagomedov runs him over and beats him, I am fucking psyched for a Tony Ferguson-Khabib fight to finally go down. But I think Poirier is in a position right now to do a lot of damage and have a lot of success in this matchup. Only time will tell. Can't wait. Thanks for tuning in, guys. Talk to you soon. Hi.